I will be reading the book How the Sea Began, a Taíno myth retold and illustrated by George Crespo. In the beginning of time, before the land was surrounded by sea, in a place called Soania, there were 4 great mountains. One mountain was called Borinquen, land of brave men, and on that mountain, in the village of Coabe, lived an old man named Yaya with his wife Itaba and their only son Yayael. Yayael was a skilled hunter. Yayael hunted with a bow that his father had carved for him out of tabonuco wood. It is said that the tabonuco tree is the home of spirits and that its wood holds magical powers. This saying may be true because when Yael went out hunting, he always brought back game. The people of Goabe ate well, even when the other hunters came back empty-handed. One day, while Yael was out hunting, he saw that the sky was darkening in the east. A flock of swallows flying before the lowering clouds circled around his head, flapping and beating their wings. Yael knew that this was a warning that Guabansesh, the terrible goddess of hurricanes, was coming. He quickly hid his bow and arrows under a large rock and ran towards the village, hoping to reach safety before the winds overtook him. Guabansesh created a hurricane that struck with tremendous force. The winds howled and raged for hours. The villagers who had been working in their fields sought shelter in a cave nearby. Yaya and Itaba prayed to the supreme god Yokahu that Yayael would come through the storm unharmed. When the winds died down, the people thanked Yokahu, then ventured from the cave. They found that their huts had been flattened by the storm. Yaya and Itaba waited, but Yayael did not appear. Yaya went to search for his son. He found the bow and arrows where Yael had hidden them, but of Yael himself there was no sign. When Itaba saw her husband returning with their son's bow and arrows in his hands, she called out Yael's name. Then she fell down weeping at her husband's feet. Yaya reverently placed Yael's bow and arrows in a large gourd. Then he sat down beside his wife and wept too. The villagers helped one another rebuild their homes. When the time for grieving was over, they helped Yaya and Itaba hang the gourd from the ceiling of their hut, where the bow and arrows would be safe, just in case Yayael's spirit should wish to visit them. Yaya picked up his own bow and arrows and went to hunt, for now the village could no longer depend on Yael to bring home meat. Though the men of the village hunted every day, they seldom brought home enough for everyone. All were hungry. Even the children, who were always fed first, were becoming thin and sickly. One evening, Yaya asked Itaba to lower the gourd that held Yael's weapons. "I want to see our son's bow," he said. "Perhaps it still holds the power of the tabonuco." As Itaba lowered the gourd to the floor, it tipped just a little. Out spilled many beautiful plump fish. Yaya and Itaba were astonished. They had never before seen such fish, large and silvery, and still breathing, as if freshly taken from the water. Itaba cooked them and invited the whole village to share the meal. The villagers rejoiced in their good fortune. They sang, "Bahari, Yael, we honor you, Yael," and went to bed with full stomachs. The following day, all the villagers went out to work in the fields. They left 4 boys to guard the gourd that held Yael's bow and arrows, the bow and arrows that turned into fish. The boys were curious and hungry. The higher the sun climbed into the sky, the more curious and hungry they became. One boy stood up on tiptoe and tried to peer into the gourd. Then a second boy tried to climb up and see inside. They were joined by the other 2, and together they brought the gourd down to the floor. Out flopped 4 fish, just the right size for 4 hungry boys. The boys cooked the fish and ate them. Then they ate 4 more. They sang praises to Yael's spirit and lowered the gourd again for more fish. Suddenly, the boys heard Yaya and the villagers returning from the fields. Afraid of being caught, they hurried to raise the gourd to the ceiling. In their haste, they failed to secure the rope that held the gourd in its place. The gourd fell to the ground and broke open. Water rushed out of the broken gourd. In an instant, everything in the hut was afloat. A wave swept the boys out of the hut and out of the village and left them, choking and sputtering, on the path that led to the fields. There, Yaya and the other villagers found them. The water tasted of salt, the boys said, like the salt of tears. Water continued to flow from the gourd. It flowed and rose to cover the land, and fish swam out of the gourd, large fish and small fish, starfish, urchins, and jellyfish. All kinds of sea creatures came out of the gourd to fill the water with life. The villagers gathered on the mountaintop and watched as the waters covered Suanya. When at last the water stopped rising, they saw that their mountain, Borinquen, was now an island. They gave their thanks to Yokahu, dressed themselves festively, and celebrated with music and dancing, because as long as there were fish in the sea, they would not go hungry. And this is one story of how the sea began. And that's the end of one story. Thank you for tuning in.